So today we are waiting to start the live session on counseling in organizations. And yes, our guest has joined. Hi, ma'am.
Hi, Yasoda. How are you doing today?
I'm good, ma'am. How are you?
I'm good. I had a busy day, but just looking forward to this session today. So you look great.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, you too.
I feel like you had a good vacation, not a vacation actually, some sort of a break, right?
Yes, a good one.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so people, today we are going to be discussing about counseling in organizations and moreover about mental health in organizations. And we have Miss Dinishka with us today. And of course, she's not someone new to us. We have been having a couple of sessions earlier as well. So yes, ma'am, I'm not going to take too much of your time. So first, let
Yeah,
me thank you for joining with me today.
no worries at all. I am supporting your work. Uh, I think you started this sessions or discussions last year, as I can remember. And I would support any time because you're doing great work promoting mental health in different disciplines. And I'm so honored to be here and part of your journey. So keep doing this work because this is what we need globally and nationally, especially in the Sri Lankan society. We need individuals like you who would talk about mental health and related issues openly so that people can share their ideas, knowledge, and learn and be aware, right? So thank you so much for having me today, Yasoda.
Okay, ma'am. So today's first question is about like before we go on to organizations,
Yeah,
can we let our viewers know what counseling actually is? Because we know that there is a lot of confusion on
yeah,
many topics in mental relating to mental health. So counseling is also another big thing people get confused about. So can we just
exactly.
tell them what it
Ex-
is?
Sure, because I sometimes when I get this question, I smile because there's so much misconception around counseling. Compared to how the Western society would look at counseling, it's different. Uh, how we created an environment for people to understand what counseling is. For an example, for a lot of people who would want to study psychology, they would think psychology is about counseling. But when we ask them what is counseling, for them, counseling is, or you sit on a chair and listen to the other person's problem, right? So listening, there are so many types of listening. So counseling is not just listening to the person's problem and then you give them something to do on your view about the problem. Uh, in the sense that we don't expect counselors to just, uh, give solutions to the client or the patient, but we expect them to guide the people. Now, if I go back to the history of counseling, counseling has a long history. Counseling started as an vocational movement or occupational movement in the history during the World War, especially World War II. Because during the World War II, people started losing jobs, unemployment was a problem, and with the unemployment, there was so much social change, social conditions affecting people's lives. So people wanted a pathway to resolve their issues, talk to somebody to guide them what to do with their life. And in 1938, the Great Depression hits the world. With the Great Depression, people started to have problems with how can they move on with life because financially, economically, politically, lives were impacted. So people who were in the psychology field started to sort of advise people on what to do, how to go about their work, how to go about their career and with their occupation. So with that, there were three pioneers of vocational movement. One is Frank Parsons. He is considered as the father of vocational movement in the 1900s. And in 1908, they established a vocational movement bureau in Boston in order to guide people, advise people what kind of decisions they should take in their workplace. Now, this is how counseling started. They did not focus on people's personal issues. So they were pretty much concerned of how do we survive in this Great Depression? How do we face challenges in the economic system or politically? So they didn't go about talking about their sex lives, divorce matters. So with the vocational movement, slowly counseling started to change from giving advice to guidance. So guiding, you don't give advice. Yeah, for example, I can give you advice to do something. So I would say, okay, Dasada, go and do this, right? You can do this and try this out. But counseling, the idea of counseling changed into guidance from advice. You would sit with the client, your client, and you would talk to her or him or them and share ideas, like brainstorming. And this developed into other fields as well, not in occupation, but this touched the field of education, then slowly moved into people's personal problems. So counseling became from advice to guidance to work with the client. Now, earlier, counseling, like I told you, people started to believe, okay, we go to someone who's an expert in psychology or psychiatry, like especially counseling, we say it's talk therapy, because counseling and psychiatry are two different fields. Counselors may not be qualified in prescribing medication, not have a medical degree, but may have a diploma, a higher diploma, a master's or a PhD in counseling techniques. But psychiatry, the counselor can be a psychiatrist too. The person, the individual, would have a medical degree and practicing the field as a therapist and a counselor or a psychiatrist. So psychiatrists can prescribe medication in working with the patient, right? So the counselors did the talk therapy part. They would actively listen to the clients and then guide them to solutions. So when counseling started to develop, the psychologists like Carl Rogers came up with the client-centered therapy. Carl Rogers is a humanist. He believed in the individual has more power to control their emotions and understand what kind of issues the individual is facing, right? Rather than making someone understand your problem and giving you guidance, Carl Rogers wanted to let the client decide, okay, this could be my solution. I'm going to act upon it. So the counselor-centered therapy converted into client-centered therapy. Now, at present, we focus on counseling as giving the autonomy, giving the control to the client to come up with solutions, right? So, but the society thinks counseling is you go to the counselor or the therapist, you would pour out your problem and the person listens to it and give you some checklist, okay? Go and do meditation. Go and eat some, go to a restaurant and have some coffee with your friends, you'll be fine. That's not how counseling is. And also counseling started to focus on different techniques because everyone has different problems. You don't have a cookie cutter model to go about every problem. So the counselors have to be qualified, trained, practice in the field in order to use these techniques individually. Now, counseling had taken so many branches: individual counseling, family counseling, for students, and of course now today we will be talking about occupational counseling, or do we need counselors at workplace or organizations, right? So the counseling spread its wings to different areas in the world, different sectors in the world, and we need counseling, right? So, but the misconception about counseling doesn't have much to do is wrong, because we talk about counseling burnout, because counselors are human beings, right? So they can be tired, they can be fatigued, and they can go through burnout as well. So it's a highly serious job, and you need to be qualified to counsel, because people think, okay, I know a little about psychology, so now I can counsel someone, right? So I think there are a lot of fake and wrong media quotes on media that I see. Someone who would finish 3 months course in diploma in counseling or 6 months course in diploma in counseling would go into say, okay, I'm a certified counselor, so I can solve your problem. But you need to be certified under counseling association in that particular country. You need to have license to practice as a counselor, because you come under APA, American Psychological Association or American Psychiatric Association, when it comes to ethics. And then you need to protect the ethics. You just can't violate the ethics, because we find so many fake counselors in our society who think they can solve problems by listening to people and giving some advice, which is completely wrong. It's a highly credible, a serious job, right? An occupation, not a job, not a duty, but a service they would provide to the people for mental health promotion. So that's the basic idea of counseling.
That was a great insight into it, ma'am, because again, as we talk always, in the Sri Lankan context, in every way, we are like very much different from how it happens in the rest of the world. And the
Exactly.
misconceptions, like you told, like, first of all, the big confusion between a counselor and a psychiatrist, because like every time you talk about something, they're like, you need to see a psychiatrist.
Yes,
So
exactly.
directly going into the medical part of it. So many people do
Exactly.
not know the difference. So what you
Exactly.
explained was really useful. So I hope if people are
Yeah,
watching, they would get a great idea on this.
thank you. And also, people do not know that in our national hospitals, we have a psychiatric section, a sector, a counseling sector, and there are counselors and psychiatrists would ready to provide service. But I have come across individuals who would not have any idea that we have provided that services in the hospitals, which is sad, because that is one thing. You are not aware about mental health, how it works in the society. At the same time, you may not have information how to access them. Now, I think this is a problem with the system, how we promote mental health. So, if we have uh, information given to people, I think people would consider coming to counselors. And at the same time, the stigma attached to the word counseling. So, people think, oh, you have to be mad to go to a counselor. Or are you mad? Like in
Exactly.
Sinhala, it's a counselor කෙනෙක් ගාවට යන්න, right? So this is the stigma we get every day. Oh, you're doing psychology. Oh, psychology is learned by people who would go crazy or who would, um, talk about the mind. I want to read my mind, your mind, right? So this stigma needs to be addressed first, and then we need to give uh, authentic information about what is counseling and how you can have access to it, right?
Exactly.
And I think someone is asking about how confidential is counseling. Counselors are bound by their ethics, bound by the laws in the field to be very confidential about the client. Now, I accept the fact that there are counselors who would violate these as human beings, right? So they would go and tell someone, okay, I know this person came to my counseling session. I think it's a friend of yours. But counselors cannot do that. Most counselors are bound by the ethics. It's your personal ethics that you would place into your career, right? So all counselors are not like that, but there are some counselors here and there. But I think the most counselors I have met, they're bound by the ethics that you cannot expose your client's information to anyone else, not even a family member, not even your spouse, right?
So this is why we need to go to professional and licensed people.
Exactly, exactly. That you have a thorough understanding of what you do. This comes with practice, Yasoda. This comes with maturity and work ethics. So if you are a person who gives so much credit to what you do and you know that you are bound by ethics, I think that person, a disciplined mind, a person who's disciplined by the ethics would not ever violate the ethical boundaries of your career, of your work.
Exactly. So, ma'am, moving on to today's topic, counseling in organizations. So, do we need
Yeah,
a
counselors.
counselor? So, that's the main question we have. So, let's talk about how mental health is important in organizations first.
Yes. Now, talking about when I heard about that you want to talk about this issue, I was kind of happy because a lot of organizations, not in the Western world, because in Western world I have come across there are counselors because they can afford it. But in a country like ours, the question we have is, can most of our organizations afford a counselor? Because you need to uh, pay the person and keep the person and give credit to the person. So one thing the organizations would say is, when you give the idea, we cannot afford a counselor here, or well, we can take care of our employees, so therefore we don't need a counselor. Because the word counselor again would go with taboo and stigma, right? The moment they hear counseling, they think, oh, our employees are not mentally ill, so why do we need a counselor? We can have counselors who would talk about their work problems. We can have HR department. We have an HR department, human resource department, so they can solve your problem. But
Mm.
occupational health is something really different from uh, uh, HR, right? Human resource problem. So uh, most organizations now have started to have their own counselors because they have understood that employee mental health affects the work productivity. Now, we study occupational psychology, or we call it organizational psychology. Why psychology needs to be applied in the workplace? Basically, organizational psychology talks about work behavior, your behavior in the workplace attached to your post, attached to your job title. But when it comes to occupational health, this is not just about your work position in the organization. This ranges into your work outside your organization, how work life balance takes place. Now, most organizations, companies, even government organizations, fail to see that the psychosocial conditions employee would go through can affect their efficiency and work productivity. Because I always say, please keep HR, human resources, from mental health. A HR professional can be qualified in counseling, though, because HR and mental health, counseling, occupational health can go together. But the HR representative has to be qualified in counseling with a degree and be certified, right? Or else you have the HR department, but attached to that, you have a counselor, occupational counselor who can help the employee. Now, in what ways a counselor would help employees? Now, we know that there are a lot of issues in organizations, like how do I commit to the organization and give my 100% to work productivity, and also how do I keep my life in a balanced way? What do I do now when I go out of work after 5 o'clock? What do I do? Do I be on the phone replying to emails, or am I going to spend my time with my family, right? Am I going to respond to those emails? Now, here, what I have seen is most people, even including myself, would take my work home, right? So I would do my work, and sometimes I love my work. I love working with my kids, my students. But sometimes I feel like I don't get enough sleep, and that will affect my work productivity next day, right? Now, this burnout of uh, your mental health can happen to any employee. What I have understood learning about and researching into organizational psychology is that a lot of supervisors and managers are unaware of that fact, unaware of the fact that the outside external triggers can affect the employee's work productivity at work. Now, we have two concepts called absenteeism and presenteeism in occupational psychology. Absenteeism is the employee is habitually, constantly absent at his or her work. She or he does not come to work, and it will affect the work productivity, overall work productivity of the organization. Presenteeism is the person comes to work, but the mind is not focused because the person probably goes through a certain kind of mental condition, or we do not know, the person may get bullied by other colleagues, or the issue like racism, the person may go through discrimination, racism, right? Some kind of issue is bothering him or her. So even though they are present at work, the efficiency of work is not properly taking place. So the managers or supervisors would see that and definitely label the person as, okay, you're not working properly. Why don't you work? So either I have to fire you, or maybe just not give you that promotion I was thinking of. But we fail to understand the person may be affected by something. So the organizations are obliged to look into the safety of the employees, not just physically. I think a lot of companies and organizations take precautions to have insurance policies, right? But do we see mental health coverage in those policies, right? So if you do not, if you do not have a way to support your employee, your organization can be very sensitive to the problem and how the organization would proceed. You can hire a counselor. A counselor can be a person that you would hire from the outside, the external sector. Because the problem here is when you know the person, let's say a person from the organization become a counselor, people may not go to that person because of the closeness, because of you know that person, you don't want to go and you don't have the trust, you don't want to go and tell your problem. So it's always better if the organization can hire someone from the outside. So the organizations have to be sensitive to occupational health of basically mental health as well as physical health, right? Mental health cannot be taken for granted. Mental health is one of the key factors why an organization is efficiently moving forward, because the work productivity relies on how much effort the employee would give to that organization, right? Now, the commitment issues may take place if the employee is not satisfied. Are you satisfied in your job? Are you satisfied with the pay you get, right? Are you satisfied once you do the work during the day, you go home and you can sleep peacefully thinking, I had a productive day? But I think a lot of people do not have this, because I have spoken to people who would always complain, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I have so much to finish, I may not have time. So what can organizations do? So the managers, the employees, the supervisors, right? The people who are on the upper scale of decision making look into ways and strategies, prevention, to make pathways to make the work convenient for their employees. So I think a counselor can help to a greater extent. So the employee comes into a place where he or she would trust the counseling process and would go and talk at any time, make an appointment and talk. And some employees may not want to go to talk to a counselor face to face, so they can talk over the phone. They can use, some kind of an app to communicate. So the organization can make these strategies to help the employee. So the more work, the more steps that you take for protecting the occupational health of the employee starts to build more trust with the organization. So the employee thinks, yes, I do a lot of work for the organization. So the organization looks after, right? I think even in Sri Lanka, this is what we don't have. People do a lot of work, but people don't have that satisfaction whether the organization would look after me at the end of the day, right? So this is why I highly suggest and I think a counselor is a must in any organization. But the other problem is the financial difficulty of the organization, whether they can hire a counselor to, work with their employees.
Exactly. Yeah, and the other problem was you already touched upon that, whether the counselor should be from within the organization or whether they have
Yes,
to be from outside.
yeah.
So, yes, it's better,
Um,
always better if it's from outside, as you said, isn't it, man?
Exactly. The outside person is better because you can, it is being noted in psychology, you can build a trust with a stranger, someone you actually personally do not know, than with someone you know. This is why out of work, a lot of individuals would like to talk to strangers about problems, go to a counselor, and not do not have the willingness to talk about your problems to a family member because the family members can judge you and get panicked, get anxious, get emotionally involved. You get emotionally involved because you know the person, right? For for example, you tell a problem to your mother, so the mother becomes so anxious and worried, and there's a lot of emotional conflict between you two. So once you
Yes.
tell your problem to a stranger, the stranger may take a different stance towards the problem, right? So this is what we promote in counseling. So this is why we think those who are trained in counseling, certified in counseling, needs to be involved in organization, occupational health in companies and organizations because uh, for the for the most part, a lot of managers and supervisors may fail to acknowledge and understand their employees can go through a certain mental health problem. Okay, now for example, some of the researchers in Harvard Business Review have mentioned that mental health in organization is the second pandemic we have with the COVID-19 because the entire routine of work changed for us. So we started working remotely, right? So the work we used to do at work, we brought it home. So the work-life balance got merged together. So you don't have the opportunity now to go to office 9 to 5 work and come home and have a different life. But you have your work at home now. So you have to deal with your kids, you have to deal with your spouse, your pets, everything that happens around that environment. So because of that, there's so much stress and depression had started to develop. In one research, I found that annually in the US, it's been pointed out that 44 million, as far as I remember, $44 million is being lost from organizations due to mental health issues and productivity issues that the organization have because people may not work giving their full support to work productivity. They would lack the commitment and they would lack the energy to work for the organizations and they would just keep their job just to get paid because they need to be financially, established to look after themselves. So they would do the work, they would not mentally focus. They would have the work, okay, I need some job. I need this job because then I can help the family, right? But there's no development, self-development at work. Now, most organizations think organization has to develop, right? But they don't think individual employees need to develop as well. So if you do not have any development at your workplace, which means if for 30 to 45 years, let's say someone is working for a company, you are at the same place. No promotion, no recognition, no encouragement from the higher staff or supervisors. You are just like doing the same routine work and you get bored, right? Because there's no development. You are stuck somewhere which you don't know which pathway to take to sort of self discover what else you can do. So your skills are stagnant at one place doing the same thing. Now, organizations have to be very concerned of this, right? So as long as the employee develop and come up with innovative ideas, the organization or the company benefits from it, right? So therefore, it is not just about the development of the organization, but each individual, each employee has the right to explore pathways how they can develop within the organization, using the organization to develop. And then they are ready to give the full commitment to work because they trust the organization. The organization would
Exactly.
back them up, right? That's mental stability. That is peace for them. That is the mental focus they may have, right? If you are not happy with your job, you're definitely not going to do proper work, right? So you are
Of course.
sort of distracted away from the efficient work you would do. You would just stare at a computer for 5 hours and then go to lunch and then come back, do some, file work and go home. So every day you would do it as a monotonous work or a routine. That is not self-development. That is not career development. And that is not mental health, occupational health. Even World Health Organization points out the less you talk about mental health at work, you promote stigmatization of mental health at work, right? So this is why counseling comes into play. If the higher staff, if the higher managers fail to acknowledge that their employees can go through mental health, do not hide it. Do not try to, not give consent to it, but openly talk about it and bring it to the table. Bring it to the table in the meetings. Show the employees that you are interested in helping them mentally to move forward, right? So most managers do not come into a part that where he or she would actively get involved in listening to a person's problem, right? So this is why employees would go and talk to colleagues. So they
Mm.
have little clips. They would talk to colleagues saying, okay, I have this problem. But the higher managers do not know about it. So they can't give a solution because they do not know about what the employee is going through. The point is, if an organization can give maternity leave, sick leave, why don't you give the employee a mental break? Why don't you talk to the employee, a person who may go through depression or stress, right? Or any other psychosocial condition that impacts your work. Give them a break, right? Give them more importance. If you can give importance to maternity leave for a person, you might as well give the employee a mental break to sort of discover and go through the process for healing, right? So that can be done through a counselor. And the counselor also has a part to play with the higher staff and the employee.
Mm.
Counselor is there to protect the employee because that's what the counselor's role to ask what it is, what's the problem, and guide the employee. At the same time, counselor has to protect the organization as well because organization, the counselor, employee, all three sectors would go together, right? So therefore, a counselor who is well trained in organizational psychology or counseling, certified counselor, know how to do this, to take strategy, how to bind the employee and organization together so that they work together. So the employee feels that the organization is there to support him or her in dire times, right? And the problem here in Sri Lanka is I don't think most organizations have counselors because of the stigmatization of mental health.
Yeah.
I haven't found any organization, to be honest, it's my experience. I haven't found any organization who's employing a counselor to work with employees. So the employees would either they are unsatisfied, either they would complain, or either their work productivity has declined. So they find different ways to how to tackle the problem, especially during the pandemic time. So what steps have we taken in Sri Lanka, in Sri Lankan society to address our employees' mental health during the pandemic time? I don't know whether I don't think we have taken a successful step to talk about mental health in the occupational sector or with the employees in organizations and companies. Sadly, right?
True. And the basic problem here is what I feel is, madam, like organizations feel that all the stress and like whatever mental health issues people face is from their personal life. So it's like
Exactly,
it's their
exactly.
baby to take care of, so let them deal with it. So we don't have to
Yeah,
care about it. But what
exactly.
they need to understand is the impact of these things is going to come into their work life as well. So it
Definitely,
is not about
definitely.
the organization poking their nose into the person's personal issues, but
Yeah,
supporting them to deal with it.
exactly, exactly. So I think none of those ideas are put into practice here because, like you said, you have a mental issue. Let's say you have stress or depression. It's highly personal for you. So the organization should not speak about it, which is wrong because organization needs to understand the depression may affect the organization because the employee is part of the organization. So you cannot discard the employee just because he or she is going through a difficult time with their mental health, right? At the same time, in the US, the American Psychological Association, they gather annually, do a conference in Washington, D.C., and they find companies who are really doing good, providing mental health counseling care for their employees. They actually select best organization. I haven't
Mhm.
heard anything like that in Sri Lanka. They don't have to, have conferences, but they do not promote organizations to have counselors or a better mental health care for the employees. So I feel like, to be honest, Yasoda, mental health is not even a considerable factor in companies and organizations. If you go to a government office, I don't think you may find counselors in that particular government sector or the office, right? So the people who work there may say, well, I am not mentally ill. මට පිස්සු නෑ, right?
Mm.
අපිට counselors ලා ඕනේ නෑ. පිස්සු මිනිස්සුන්ට තමයි counselors ලා ඕනේ.
Mm.
This is the day-to-day conversation I hear. Sometimes I get involved
True.
that people tell me. So අර පිස්සු කියන මතය අපි අයින් කරන්න. We need to get that being a lunatic. You necessarily
Exactly.
do
Yeah.
not have to have a mental disorder to meet with a counselor, right? So as a student, you can meet with a counselor to develop yourself, to focus on your studies, to train your mind to focus, right? Train your mindfulness. Even I used to do that, even though I'm in the field of psychology, I can go to a counselor and talk about my stresses and issues I have, right? So this, you don't need to be within quotes, within inverted commas, a lunatic to go for a counselor or psychotherapist. And this is the danger we have in society, the misconception, misunderstanding, and people not knowing what counseling and psychology can do to better your mental health, right? So mental health is not, for an example, like I always say, mental health is not cancer. Therefore, we do not have to talk about now. When you have someone who has cancer, when you know someone who has cancer, you have empathy, you have sympathy, you feel sorry, right? So we ask the person, how, how do you feel, right? What's happening? So we try to pay attention. But for a mentally ill person, you stay away. Why? Oh, this person is dangerous. This person may, harm me or harm himself or herself, right? So we consider a person who would go through a stressful or a depression episode as a dangerous person. This is highly wrong, right? We undermine mental health and we criminalize mental health. That's the problem here. We criminalize it. There's a stigma, criminalization of mental health, right? And it happens in organizations as well. Because organizations fail to understand my employee can go through a certain phase of mental health condition at any time due to lack of support, due to lot of work, overworking, overwhelmed. So how do I arrange? How do I manage? Stress management is important in any organization. How does the organization take steps to manage the stress of their employees. Now, some organizations take annual trips, which is a good thing. They take the employees out, take them to a restaurant, give them food, do things, take the families, not just the employees. That is good because it gives a certain kind of a boost, energy, a refreshment, refreshing yourself to come back to work. But some organizations do not do that. And that's one reason is maybe the organization does not have much funding to do so, maybe do not create much capital, right? But human capital is important in the 21st century. Without people, we may not be able to do a lot of things, right? We need humans in the organization sector. So this is why in psychology, in organizational psychology, we tell over and over the work behavior, the work ethics, and mental health is so important, right? If the employee's mental health is declining, the work behavior is declining too. The behavior of the person to commit to the organization or goal-oriented behavior may decline because you don't care about the goal. You just want to finish the project and get done with it. But in an organization, we don't just finish project. We have targets. We want to successfully finish it. We want to successfully do the teamwork, right? So if you are pressured by work and if you are going through stress or depression, you may not work with a colleague in a mutual way, right? You just don't care. So there are so many situations like that can happen in the workplace, which the higher management may not be aware, right? And getting bullied indirectly, like getting bullied for your race, how you dress. Remember, we talked about racism, appearance,
Yes.
that can happen too, right?
Mm.
So we go through so many challenges at workplace, right? But we need to, the organization has to assure that they look after the employee. They look after us, right? So I'm part of an organization. I'm sure you're part of an organization. So we need to be satisfied with what we do, right?
Organizations really need to understand this, that the mental health of their employees is important for them to develop as an
Exactly.
organization.
Exactly. Now, I think in the Asian continent, I think we have, because of the stigma we have about counseling and psychotherapy and psychiatry, of course, because psychiatry is the place where that you would diagnose a patient and would put the patient through medication and psychotherapeutic techniques like cognitive behavioral. And we can apply this in the workplace too, cognitive behavioral, because basically it talks about how you change the employee's thoughts to be positive, which affects his or her behavior at workplace. And then we use techniques like person-centered therapy introduced by Carl Rogers. So a certified counselor can use these techniques to address the employee's problem, depending on what kind of a problem the employee has. So you can't, like I said, a cookie cutter model for every employee who has the problem, right? So you need to be individually approaching the employee in order to see what can I do? How can I help you? How can I counsel you, guide you to overcome the issue? So the problem is in Sri Lanka, these steps don't take place in organizations and companies. We fail to see that, right? So a lot of people are under pressure, and I think this pressure has become normalized now for people. They would project it to the society thinking, oh, it's the world pandemic, every country goes through that, the economy is bad, the politics is bad. So we are sort of projecting and not sort of trying to give an excuse for what we go through, right? I think it's bad. I think the system has sort of manipulated us to thinking that way, oh, globally we are going through some shit, so you are affected by it. So do not talk about your mental health right now because you don't have the right to do so. So try to live, try to survive, try to work, earn your living. But this is not
Yeah.
healthy for people. We are not making a healthy society, right? Individuals are different because in personal psychology, we would discuss that everyone has different characteristics and everyone has different mental capacities, how much pressure a person can take. And the other problem is these stresses can affect the brain chemicals, the neurotransmitters in the brain, right? And that can affect your body. So the mental health condition, even at your workplace, if there's so much stress and work that you are doing, overwork, you are physically unhealthy, you are mentally unhealthy. You have a chemical imbalance taking place in your brain. At the same time, you have physical ailments like back pain. You are crouching over a computer, right? You don't have time to uh, have your meals on time. You have just like 20 minutes to 15 minutes to grab
Mm.
something, and so this is not healthy. So the organization has to have a plan. How do I uh, how do we stress manage this, right? Now this is why companies like Google, Microsoft, of course they have a lot of money, they get a lot of funding,
Mm.
they have test centers, they have swimming pools, right? People
Mm.
can swim, take a nap, and they make their environment like with gardens and parks because people love nature. You feel peaceful, you can take a walk, right? But right now, if you see organizations, companies here in Sri Lanka, all congested. We don't see trees in town because right now the environment is going through hell in Sri Lanka. But on top of it, right, people are in a rat race of finishing things, right? So
Mm.
even if you look outside, we have nothing to sort of take pleasure on, right? So even in media, there's nothing to sort of give ourselves an advice to. This is how we look after our mental health. If someone else is not looking after our mental health, we need to look after our mental health. For that, you need to have education and awareness of, well, I can go to a counselor, I can go to a therapist, I can get some services, right? The services are provided by the system. So because it is a stigma and a taboo, people decline, people just reject the idea of visiting counselors. So because the
Exactly.
counselor, yeah, because the counselor is a person that you cannot, go and visit and tell your family I went to a counselor because it's highly
Yeah.
stigmatized, right?
So, in whatever perspective we take, maybe educational or occupational, whatever it is, mental health, the reason why it is not being looked at in a proper way is because of this stigma. So, wherever we go to, whatever topic we take, we end up with this thing that it is being a stigma. So, we have
Exactly,
to get over that.
exactly. And one other thing I have to mention you is a lot of people love to fix other people. Like even in workplaces, if you make a mistake or if you say I'm going through a problem, the people will try to fix the person's problem or person. You have to go and do this, right? Well, you can't be lenient. You have to be rough. You have to be aggressive. You can't fix people. In counseling, in organizational counseling and counseling in general, we believe that you should not fix people because people are different, right? People, they have a different way of approaching problems. You can give an idea. You can give a sort of a guidance, but not to go and fix the problem for him or her, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people try to fix other people's problems. They love to do that. But when you have a problem, you can't fix it yourself. But you are so good at trying to change the entire personality, fix the other person. Do not ever do that. That can do more harm for a person in life in general and at workplace if the person actually processes it negatively, right? So never do that. Never go to fixing people, but do actively listen and say that this is what I think about the problem, right?
Yeah.
You can do this. You can go to a counselor, or if you have a problem at workplace, address the problem to your manager, a higher staff. So this is what I think. Your opinion. You just
Mm.
cannot fix it for them, right? So the active listening is important. Now, sometimes in companies, it's okay to have colleagues who support you, who has your back. The colleagues they share our work together. Sometimes we do that, right? So, but do it in an understanding way that you don't do that for the other person to control that, right? There has to be a mutual agreement that you are mutually supporting each other. Some people are very dominant. Some colleagues can be very dominant in a team. A person can be very dominant, and he or she wants to get things done the way she or she wants, right? So that won't help the other team members. It's an aggressive
Yeah.
approach to get things done. Because of that, a person may fail to be happy or to commit to the goal, the project they do, right? So don't ever do that. So you can give your idea and say, this is what you say. And stop from there. Stop the conversation from there saying, this is my idea. And listen to the person. Listen to the person you talk to, what he or she say about it, how
Mm.
he or she responds to it, right? So the conversation and the language you would use at workplace is also highly important, right? Very important. But do we pay attention to that, the language we use at workplace? Sometimes people get hurt, right? Because we respond emotionally, right? The way we express our feelings on our through our expressions on our face, right? These are important, but people do not pay attention to these things. Other people get impacted, just like you get impacted or get impact from someone else's uh, a question, a response, right? Other people have the same effect from what you say. So
True.
language also play a very crucial role in communicating ideas with people at the workplace, right? Now, if a manager yells at a person like now in Sri Lanka, I have heard a lot of people who use haraka, gona, right?
Mm.
Very deteriorating terms like that. Harak වැඩ කරන්නේ. Gong වැඩ
Mm.
කරන්නේ. Now these are basically things that I hear from general conversation. When you meet people, that is not positive. That is not positively developing the person, pointing out a mistake. So if you're on a higher staff, your employer should know how to use language in order to communicate and address the problem. Because the words you would use can emotionally impact a person's mental well-being, right?
Exactly. Yes. So it's like so true that how you're being treated at your workplace
Exactly.
impacts the mental health,
Definitely.
which people, especially again and again, we come to the same thing in the context of Sri Lanka. Many
Yeah,
people fail to understand it.
exactly. So how do we arrange or how do we support a workplace culture? We have culture, right? A workplace culture that is particular for that particular company or the organization. Is your workplace culture positively encouraging your mental health and physical well-being? Right? You can understand that the employee feels that. So how do
Mm.
we arrange this workplace culture to be positive? What kind of ground rules do we have between employees? Right? What kind of policies we have? So these are needed for the mental and the physical well-being of the employee. We are not just going to a primary school. If we are adults, we commit to our work, right? And to improve or to develop the organization, therefore, there has to be certain ground rules established when we work with other human beings, with other people with different personalities. So the workplace culture needs to be highly positive, supportive to mental well-being, right? So
Yes.
if you have that, and if you have a counselor and the organization, that any time that you can approach with an appointment, I think that would be really good, right? So this is actually up to the organization to do so. The
True.
organization
The
has to
bottom line,
exactly. So
it's that the
that approach,
organization needs to understand the importance of the mental health of the employees and
yes,
work out some mechanism to help them out.
exactly. That's very true. Yes. So we say it's strategies to develop and prevent problems. So preventive measures that we take for an employee to go to a stress level of regarding the work he or she has. So the organization has the accountability, the responsibility to prevent it, right? So that those steps need to be taken. It is just not about making capital, just not about looking for benefits. So there's no point the organization doing successful if the employees are burdened with stress and work that they are not happy with, right? Because they do the work because they want to protect their job, they want to protect their
Yeah.
career. So it is not healthy at all. So there's no point talking about successful organizations without mental health of the employees.
Yeah, probably the pressure would help them for a short time period, but in the
Exactly.
long run, it's going to be a disaster.
Exactly. As long as you have adrenaline, you may have the energy to work, but your adrenaline declines at some point because it's a lot of pressure for your brain to process information, right? Hell of a lot of work to do, right? You come home and you reply to emails and you go back the next day. You don't have much sleep. So we need to think about this. So the hormones like dopamine and serotonin, they are all get involved in planning and decision making, right? So there can be a hormonal imbalance when you get sick physically and mentally, right? So therefore, the organizations have to be very careful with how they come up with strategies to access employees' problems, to solve them, and how transparent they are about mental health. And they have to start the journey for mental health by being transparent about they are talking about mental health as an important key factor in the organization, right? So then if they start a culture as that, then the people would talk about mental health as a normal thing. It gets normalized in the organization that it may include in their health insurance, the mental health coverage, and having a counselor at present, for employees. The more we try to hide it, it gets more stigmatized, right? So that stigma will stick there forever. No matter what you do, the employees are unhappy at work.
Yes. So it was a really good discussion today, ma'am. Like, I hope it
Yes, I'm
was
glad
useful
that
for the
you,
viewers.
yeah, I'm glad that
Yeah.
you came up with the idea
Actually, I
that we
have to
should.
thank our audience for this because it came as a suggestion from one of the viewers.
I see.
So,
Yes,
so
thank you
it's
so
like,
much.
yes, we have to thank the person who brought this up for suggesting this
Exactly.
because it was such a great topic to talk about.
Exactly. So I appreciate the person whoever suggested this because this is something that we do not talk about. We talk about mental health in society, we talk about mental health in education, but we do not go into the occupational psychology side, like occupational health, which is something that we do not talk about much, even on social media or even in regular discussions, right? We have failed to do so. So I think we need to pay much attention. Actually, this is a timely discussion because of the pandemic, because the work ethics, the work routine have completely changed globally. It's not just us in Sri Lanka, but globally. So what people go through, with mental health. The people who actually love to go to work and work in their office got stuck, locked down for months and months, working from home, like remotely. So how did that affect the employees, and what did organizations do to keep their energy going remotely, right? How do you address emails, whether they are long emails, short emails? Now, people do not understand this, Yasoda. So there is
Mm-hmm.
a email culture, like email etiquette actually. We call it email etiquette. So if you have a lot of things to say to an employee, a project idea, you may call the employee and not send an email, right? But if you have something short to explain, you can send an email to the employee because the employee can read it. We all love to read short emails, to be honest, right? But if it is a long email, the employee may skip or skim through things and may not even focus on the important facts. They miss certain facts, right? So the email
Yeah.
etiquette working remotely is important. Whether you talk to the employee like us, like using a platform to communicate verbally, or not writing emails and telling the employee, okay, you should finish this project by 12 midnight today, right? that doesn't give anything. That doesn't give any advice. That doesn't give any support to the employee, right? So the
Yeah.
communication that takes place during the pandemic is very important.
Yes. Even solving issues, the way they deal with it, because messages can be
Exactly.
very, what can we say, misunderstood, and
Misunderstanding. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
So
there is a
that could lead to a lot
misunderstanding.
of issues as well.
Exactly. Exactly. So again, like you said, we always look into Sri Lankan society and we see so much, to be honest, failure, the steps taken to promote mental health in organizations, in society, in life in general here, because mental health is highly stigmatized. So it's sad, it's disappointing, but I think people like me, always fight for it. Like we continue our fight to normalize it. Mental health is a normal conversation. Like you talk about your cold, your sneezing. Like it is not something criminalized. So
Yes.
take the criminalization part out of mental health. These are normal human beings. They have a disease, but that doesn't mean they are defined by the mental disorder. They are defined by the disease they have. So that is wrong.
Yes. And also organizations, it would be great if there is something that happens to make organizations understand the importance of this, not just say it's not our problem, let them deal with it. As long as the employee does the work, we are good.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that culture in organizations really has to change.
Definitely. Definitely. So
And let's
I
hope
hope
something really happens.
So I do hope that we have more students coming into, learning about organizational psychology and entering the industrial sector as counselors, psychotherapists, so that they can work with organizations on occupational health. I think we need more counselors in organizations. I encourage our scholars and students to take that route, you know. So that would be very interesting.
Becoming students is also another, it is another thing. Like when you started, you told that when somebody studies psychology, people think that they are crazy people. So that thing
Yes,
is also there. Maybe that also prevents a lot of people coming into this field because of that
definitely.
misconception also, man. Like they study psychology, so that person is crazy. So that
Yes,
idea is
exactly.
also behind many people's minds.
I
Like I
don't
have
know.
come across that. When I say I'm studying psychology, they're like, first thing they ask is this common question: can you read my mind when you finish studying? And the other thing is, you must be crazy to be doing this, or you're going to end up getting mad. So,
Yes, that's true. That's true. Even when I tell people I teach psychology, they look at me like, "Oh, you didn't have any other subject to teach. Why psychology, right?" So then I actually do not take time to explain why I teach psychology because it's going to take a lot of time if I go into explanation. So I said I'm interested because psychology is you. Psychology is your overall well-being. So the people think that there is a group of people in society who are crazy to study psychology and it doesn't generate much of capital in psychology. Psychology
mm,
is when you're working with the mad people, crazy people. So what does it do? But I think that idea, that thought, that perception needs to change, and I see some development with young people, with youth, uh, especially like seeing the number of people who register for psychology courses. And also, some people come and talk to me. Can you tell me about psychology? So I have an interest, but I don't know about it. So
mm,
uh, they honestly ask that question. So I love that because that I can guide them into different paths in psychology, different branches in psychology, right? So occupational psychology has to be included in that too, because counseling is not just about talking about personal problems. The counseling can take place in the industrial sector as well. So I think last year I found two students who are interested in and want to continue their education to become organizational psychologists because they think it's highly interesting and they love to work in a place in any organization as a psychologist, which is really great. But it's very few people who would go into that direction, right?
true.
So what can we do to promote that? What can the system do to promote that? What can the education system can do to promote that? Right? What can psychiatrists and existing organizational psychologists can do to promote that among the individuals in society, especially the youth?
maybe we could do another session on that, like how useful psychology can be.
Exactly. So I like we all believe that this never ends. This the topic in psychology, the problems, the issues, the matters that we discuss in psychology never ends, right? So it
True.
actually touches different areas on society because psychology is a human thing. It's an organism, right? It changes, it's dynamic, we apply it differently from person to person, from culture to culture. It is not stagnant in one place that you read a textbook about psychology and you apply the theory and that's it. No, we go with the changing world, the society, culture, right? The mindset, the cognitive, the perceptions about the world. So everything is about psychology. So your mental health is so important. You won't survive if your brain fails to, understand concepts and support your mind because brain is the
Yeah.
hardware, your mind, and the mind is the software. So the hardware has to work properly, and you have to safeguard that. So this is why occupational health is important at work, right? So you have to be, your mind has to be established properly in order to commit yourself to your organization's development and efficiency, right?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for your time again, ma'am.
Oh,
It
no
was a
worries.
really, really great. Like I learned, as usual, I learned a lot, and it was very interesting to discuss about this topic. Hopefully, we'll discuss more topics in the future as well.
Yes, yeah, I love to work with you because you're such an energetic, you have so much interest in psychology. So I wish you all the best, and I love to work with you on different other topics in future. So that. So thank
Sure,
you so
ma'am.
much
See
for
you
having me, and
again.
I thank the participants for taking part in the discussion. If you have questions, they can ask you and send you questions
Sure.
what they
Sure.
have, right? Yeah.
Yes. All right, ma'am. Thank you so much, and
Okay.
see you again soon.
Yeah,
And thanks again for
definitely.
your time. And it's great working with you as well.
No worries at all. No worries at all. I'll see you tomorrow, Yasuda. So
Yeah, ma'am. Sure.
you have a good night. Take care.
You too, ma'am. Bye bye.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.
Bye, everyone. Bye.